My name is Eric. I'm 35 years old, and I work as a cardiac surgeon at a large clinic. My profession requires enormous dedication, complete concentration, and nerves of steel. Every day, I balance on the edge between life and death, being responsible for the health of hearts in both the literal and figurative sense. But today, I want to talk not about the difficulties of my work, but about a personal tragedy. I want to share how a minute of weakness can trigger a destructive chain of events, jeopardizing the most valuable thing, the love and trust of loved ones. I also want to talk about the heavy burden of guilt and attempts to atone for it. First, a little background. My wife, Kate, and I have been together for 12 years. We are raising our 9-year-old daughter, Lily, and our 5-year-old son, Max. Until recently, I considered our family to be picture perfect, a strong marriage, mutual understanding, common goals, and dreams. Yes, due to my busy schedule, we saw each other less often than we would have liked. Too many night shifts, unplanned surgeries, and exhausting duties meant that I often found the children already asleep when I came home. Despite all efforts to somehow combine my schedule with her career as a designer, Kate eventually gave up on this idea and completely devoted herself to home and kids. I felt that she sorely lacked my attention, support, and just marital intimacy. She was quietly angry and offended by my constant absence. I tried to carve out precious minutes for the family and surprise my wife with bouquets of roses and gifts, but apparently, it did little to smooth over the growing alienation. After all, I'm not a robot but a living person. I also got tired, annoyed, and lost my temper. I wanted not romance, but just everyday peace. About a year ago, an event occurred that added fuel to the fire of our family troubles. Kate's mother, 60-year-old Evelyn, went through a painful divorce after 35 years of marriage. Catching her husband with a young mistress, she kicked the unfaithful spouse out the door and filed for division of property. The process was long and nerve-wracking, and Evelyn was completely worn out. When the divorce battle finally ended, it turned out that the mother-in-law had nowhere to go. Everything jointly acquired went to pay for lawyers, without much thought. Kate and I offered Evelyn to live with us until she found an apartment for herself, especially since an extra pair of hands in looking after the children never hurts. I must admit, I've always had a great fondness for my mother-in-law. Evelyn is a bright and extraordinary woman, a kind of hippie at heart, an eternal rebel and fighter for justice. In her youth, she managed to hitchhike around Europe, live in a commune, and do charity work in Africa. Even now, in her 7th decade, she has not lost her zest for life and adventurism. Every time she came to visit, she charged us with her energy and positivity. There was always something to talk about with her, about art, politics, problems of the third world. A keen mind and an amazing sense of humor combined with a slightly crazy character made communication with my mother-in-law an exciting adventure. Besides, despite her age, Evelyn has kept an excellent figure and attractiveness. Slender, toned, with expressive green eyes and a mop of curly chestnut hair. Men still looked at her admiringly. I must confess deep down, I was even a little envious of her. I myself had long lost my youthful enthusiasm and spontaneity, turning into a blinkered careerist. So, Evelyn settled in our guest wing as a visiting nanny and part-time free artist. Kate was only too happy to dump some of the household chores on her mother and get back to work. Now she stayed at her design studio late, trying to make up for the years of maternity leave. My wife and I began to see each other very rarely, except on weekends. Evelyn took on the lion's share of caring for her grandchildren, picking them up from school, cooking, reading bedtime stories, taking them to clubs and classes. She became a fairy godmother and best friend to the children, and to me, her presence seemed like a real gift of fate, some outlet, a kindred spirit in the endless whirlwind of surgeries, night shifts, and lonely dinners in front of the TV. At first, my mother-in-law and I just talked a lot in the evenings. She asked about my work with genuine interest, worrying about each patient. She knew how to support, encourage, and dispel doubts about my own abilities. She joked that she could try medicine herself. The desire to help people is in her blood. I melted from her warmth and care, from the fact that I was finally listened to, understood, appreciated. Kate, even when I managed to catch her at home, constantly complained about the rush at the studio and unscrupulous clients. She reduced any conversation to everyday life and the fact that I spent little time with my family. She reproached me for my endless business and inability to set priorities. I had no strength to listen to claims and reproaches once again, and with Evelyn, we could talk for hours on end about anything, from the latest medical innovations to ancient philosophical concepts. Communicating with her seemed to return me to a carefree youth, relaxing and inspiring at the same time. I didn't notice how I began to eagerly await our evening get-together in the kitchen over a glass of wine, admiring Evelyn's laughing green eyes, her expressive facial expressions, lively gestures. I marveled at how deftly she handles the children, involuntarily comparing her unfading attractiveness and cheerfulness with the fatigue and concern in Kate's features, mentally thanking the heavens for sending me such a wonderful relative and friend. Evelyn became a breath of fresh air in the stuffy atmosphere of my existence, a ray of sunshine dispelling the gloom of gray working days. Over time, our communication became more and more close and trusting. When alone, we already openly shared with each other the accumulated problems and experiences. Evelyn did not mince words, spicily cursing her ex-husband, but immediately adding that she did not hold a grudge against him and only wished him happiness. Because if love is gone, she said, you can't be forcibly nice, and it's better to let a person go than to drive them into a trap of duty and decency. I listened to her and thought that my situation was similar, that I was also tired of the endless pretense with Kate, the oppressive guilt for being eternally absent, of the need to lie to myself and her that everything is fine with us when the marriage is falling apart at the seams. Looking at Evelyn, so wise and self-sufficient despite all the blows of fate, I involuntarily felt admiration. More and more often, I caught myself thinking that I want to see next to me exactly such a woman. Strong in spirit, able to enjoy life under any circumstances, who does not nag and pull but supports and inspires. To whom you can open up without holding back, tell about the most intimate things, and in response, meet unconditional acceptance, not a stream of reproaches and resentments. A woman with whom you do not need to pretend to port, pay a hero, and a breadwinner. These thoughts seriously alarmed me. How can I feel anything other than friendship and kinship towards my own mother-in-law? The desire to see her as my partner and lover is fundamentally wrong, immoral, vile. Caden trusted me with the most precious thing, her mother, and I, a lustful dog, secretly fantasize about the forbidden. In desperate attempts to extinguish the flared-up lust, I doubled down on work. I tried to stay alone with Evelyn lest to avoid provocative situations, but the uninvited attraction did not go away. On the contrary, the more I suppressed it in myself, the stronger it flared up. Eventually, I realized that I needed professional help. I turned to a psychotherapist and began to deal with my feelings and desires under the supervision of a professional. I thought that the very realization of the fact that I was one step away from cheating would stop me, would not let me cross the last line. How wrong I was. On that fateful evening, everything went awry. The day at the clinic was especially difficult. An 18-year-old student was admitted with advanced heart disease. An urgent operation with a high degree of risk was required. Gathering my will into a fist, I performed magic on her body for 6 hours, trying to snatch her from death. I was assisted by a new nurse, fresh out of college. In the last minutes, her hand trembled. The scalpel went a little deeper than needed. The girl died on the operating table from massive blood loss. I was shaking with shock, anger, disappointment in my own strength. The feeling of guilt tore me apart. I cursed myself with the worst words. How could I have failed to notice, failed to foresee? After all, the student had her whole life ahead of her, and now her parents will receive a corpse instead of a healthy child. Returning home after midnight, I stood in the shower for a long time, washing away the sticky feeling of failure and insignificance. Then, I drowned my despair in whiskey, unable to sleep. Kate was safely snoring, not even bothering to ask what was wrong. In the morning, she threw an irritated, "Got drunk again, you lazy bum," over her shoulder and rushed off to work. All day, I wandered around the house like a zombie. I didn't answer calls from the clinic, afraid to learn new details of my medical error. Towards evening, Evelyn, apparently sensing something was wrong, resolutely sat me down at the kitchen table. She took out a bottle of her late father-in-law's favorite bourbon from the cellar and, in a tone that brooked no argument, stated that I wasn't going anywhere until I told her what happened. From this sincere concern, from the tenderness in her voice, the dam broke for the first time in many years. I cried my heart out, hysterically sobbing, burying my face in Evelyn's shoulder, incoherently choking on sobs. I told her about the failed operation and about my shattered dreams of saving people, about loneliness and alienation, about chronic fatigue and a sense of professional failure. She listened to me, stroking my hair like a small child, wiping away tears mixed with snot with a handkerchief. She whispered some soothing nonsense in my ear, which made it easier to breathe for the first time in a long time. I felt that I was not alone, that someone cared. Then Evelyn who led me by the shoulders and softly said, "Eric, listen. What happened is a terrible tragedy. No one is immune from medical errors, even the most brilliant surgeon. You can't take all the blame on yourself. Yes, you were in charge of the operation, but it was the nurse who directly held the scalpel. All staff should have acted as a single, well-coordinated mechanism. What happened is a tragic coincidence, not your personal failure. The grief of the girl's parents will not diminish because of this, but you must forgive yourself. Otherwise, you will simply go crazy and will not be able to do your job. I know what a colossal responsibility you bear every day, balancing on a razor's edge. Not every man is capable of such a feat. I admire your dedication, your willingness to sacrifice yourself. But dear, you can't dissolve into your profession without a trace. You need to be able to abstract, to let go, to move on. You have a family, young children who love you dearly. Kate, despite all the resentment, also loves you. We need you alive, unharmed, full of strength. Don't drive yourself. Stop, catch your breath. As soon as you feel that you are losing heart, immediately run to me. I'm always there. I will always understand and support you." With these words, Evelyn gently touched her lips to my temple and then my cheekbone, wiping away tears. It was only a light, almost weightless touch, but it was like an electric shock to me. My whole body was pierced by a sharp, almost painful desire. Blood boiled. My groin grew heavy. At that moment, the whole world disappeared. There was no more mother-in-law or son-in-law. There were only a man and a woman, passionately drawn to each other. Out of my mind, I hungrily pressed my lips to Evelyn's in a demanding kiss. She froze for a second and then readily parted her lips, letting my tongue in. Then everything spiraled out of control, feverish caresses, fingers tangled in buttons, the rustle of discarded clothing, quiet moans, ragged whispers of, "I want you." It all happened right there on the hard kitchen table. We did it furiously, forgetting about everything in the world. Evelyn turned out to be incredibly sensitive and passionate. It was as if she could read my mind, anticipating my slightest desires. Her responsiveness and dedication drove me crazy, giving unearthly pleasure. Every touch, every caress was perceived with unprecedented acuteness, obscuring the mind with a veil of bliss. Our bodies moved in a single rhythm, intertwining in ecstasy and giving an unprecedented feeling of unity and wholeness. Sated, we lay on the table, wet with sweat and incredibly happy. I kissed Evelyn on the temple, buried my face in her tousled hair, and inhaled the tart, musky scent of her skin. She smiled drowsily and ran her fingers over my chest, tracing patterns known only to her. My head was blissfully empty. My body rang with sweet languor. Sobering came later, along with the realization of the madness and irreparability of what had been done. God, how could I sleep with my mother-in-law, betraying my wife's trust, destroying everything that we had worked so hard to build over the years? I felt sick with disgust for myself, jumping off the table. I paced the kitchen feverishly, getting dressed. I muttered incoherently to Evelyn that this was all a monstrous mistake, a single episode of insanity caused by stress that I am immensely guilty for Kate. Such a thing should never happen again. My mother-in-law looked at me with sadness but understanding. She said that she would not hold me back or claim anything. Our relationship was just a flash of passion, beautiful in its transience. We should return to reality, to our usual roles as relatives. For the next couple of weeks, I was beside myself. I tried not to even look at Evelyn, avoiding any contact. She also behaved impeccably, politely, and aloofly. Only sometimes a hidden tenderness mixed with sadness flashed in her gaze. It was also painful and embarrassing to look at Kate, tormented by remorse. I looked for any excuses to escape from home, staying late at the clinic, spending the night in the residence room, taking extra shifts. My constantly crumpled and tired appearance perfectly complemented the legend. I hardly looked at Evelyn, communicating evenly and coolly, but as soon as Kate turned away, we exchanged hot, promising glances. A sweet shiver of anticipation ran through my body. Of course, it was impossible to keep such a large-scale deception secret for long. Sooner or later, the truth had to come out. That fateful morning, about 4 months ago, I briefly dropped by the house to shower and change after the night shift. Kate was still sleeping, but Evelyn was already up and making coffee in the kitchen. Unable to resist, I approached from behind, put my hands on her hips, and burying my nose in her fragrant nape, whispered how madly I missed her and wanted her. Evelyn winked playfully and dragged me into the guest bedroom. We fell onto the bed, kissing frantically, and a minute later, we were rolling on the crumpled sheets in a tangled clump of naked bodies. I think Evelyn let out a loud cry when I particularly successfully hit a tender spot inside. And it just so happened that at that very moment, the door swung open. In the doorway stood Kate, completely insane with rage. How she found out exactly where we went, whether by the creaking of the bed or the cries of ecstasy, no longer matters. Red as a crab, with eyes spinning wildly, she resembled a vengeful fury or an enraged mad. I was so dumbfounded that I couldn't even utter a word, covering myself with a sheet up to my eyes. But Kate was screaming so loudly that the windows rattled. She screeched that I was the last dog and son of a who had stained not only their marital bed, but also her daughter's trust. She threw me and Evelyn a choice abuse interspersed with sobs. She yelled that she would file for divorce and alimony, that I would never see the children again. I sat with my head bowed low. I was ready to fall through the ground with shame and disgrace. Evelyn tried to mumble something in her own defense to shield me, but Kate was relentless, sobbing and choking on snot. She hastily packed her things in a suitcase and sped off with Lily and Max in an unknown direction. Only poor Evelyn collapsed on the bed in an entwined cry, repeating over and over, "God, what have we done?" The following weeks turned into hell for me. Kate blocked my number, avoiding friends and relatives like the plague. I rushed around the city, calling everyone, trying to find out at least something about my wife and children, but to no avail. She seemed to have vanished into thin air. Colleagues at work looked at me like a wolf, whispering behind my back, burning with shame. I took an indefinite leave of absence. I spent whole days sitting in the empty apartment, looking at photos of the children and getting drunk to near death. Evelyn also disappeared, leaving no note or new number. I think she went somewhere to her sister. My whole familiar world shattered to pieces because of my own stupidity and recklessness. I lost everything at once: family, beloved work, respect of friends and acquaintances. In desperate longing for Kate, I called her answering machine, mumbling apologies incoherently, begging her to come back. I whispered that I love only her, that the affair with Evelyn is a meaningless mistake. But it seems that my wife had already made a decision. Soon, I was sent a notification of filing for divorce. Kate demanded a complete division of property and custody of the children, with the right to see them on weekends. She filed for astronomical alimony, clearly out of revenge. I did not argue, agreed to all the conditions. I understood. After a double betrayal and even with my own mother, I have no chance of saving the marriage. The wound was too deep, the shock too strong. This is not an affair on the side here. I managed to trample on both marital fidelity and family trust in one fell swoop. Now, almost 6 months later, the pain has begun to slowly subside, not to go away. I'm not ready for that yet, but at least it is dulled, replaced by a dull, aching melancholy and a sense of endless remorse. Kate allows me to see the children once every 2 weeks, although she still does not make contact herself. My relationship with Lily and Max has also gone wrong. Their eyes more and more often flash with some detachment, weariness, or something, as if I betrayed them first of all, depriving them of a cozy and reliable family rear. Every time looking at their haggard, grown-up faces, I am ready to fall through the ground. I hate myself for succumbing to weakness, indulging in momentary lust without thinking about the consequences. After all, I destroyed not only my life but also the lives of the closest people. I trampled my daughter's dreams of a big, strong family, and I deprived my son of a full-fledged fatherly upbringing. For what? A short-lived romance, a flash of suppressed sexual dissatisfaction. Evelyn and I never saw each other again. I know that she has returned to the city but tries not to cross paths with either me or her daughter. Apparently, she is burning with shame, no less than mine. How she managed to cope with guilt and loneliness is beyond me. Although, at first, I was so tempted to call her, to meet, to talk, to pour out my soul to the only person who will understand without unnecessary words, but I firmly decided, enough. The avalanche has already descended, burying everything most dear under it. Further attempts to get together will only add dirt, aggravating the already shaky situation. Now, I'm working on myself, trying to figure out what led me to the collapse. I go to psychotherapy, learn to cope with professional burnout and stress. I analyze my feelings and actions, delve into subconscious motives. I am looking for an answer to the question of how to balance work and personal life without sacrificing one for the other. I try to communicate more with my children to make up for lost time over the years of seclusion in the clinic. I hope that one day, Lily and Max will be able to forgive me, trust me again, and let me into their lives, not on a part-time basis but as a full-fledged father. I am ready to move mountains for this. Kate is also slowly regaining her peace of mind. She still avoids being alone with me, but she can already maintain the semblance of a polite conversation. Recently, she blurted out in a fit of temper that she could forgive infidelity, but never such a double betrayal. She said that before, both her mother and her husband were icons for her ideals of family virtue. The last thing in the world she expected from us was such meanness. I agree with her. I hardly deserve a full remission of sins, but even the chance to establish an even respectful relationship for the sake of the children is already a big victory. I know there is still a lot of work ahead, a long, thorny path to atone for guilt and rise from the ashes of broken trust. But I am ready to go to the end, patiently step by step, building a new foundation for communication with the closest people. Living with the stamp of a traitor and an outcast is the payment for moments of forbidden pleasure. I want to appeal to everyone who hears me. Friends, please learn from my mistakes. If it seems to you that something has gone wrong in your marriage and your partner has grown cold, do not rush to seek comfort on the side. Any problems can be solved together. If you value your union and love each other, just talk openly, without concealment or understatement. Tell each other about your dissatisfaction, fatigue, lack of attention. Think together about how to diversify family life. Add new colors to it. The main thing is not to immediately run into the arms of others who seem more understanding and passionate. Believe me, adultery will only multiply problems but not solve them. And more, if God forbid, you are visited by the insane thought of having an affair with someone from your significant other's close relatives, drive it away. No matter how much the flesh yearns, no matter how much the forbidden tempts, it's not worth it. By sleeping with your mother-in-law or sister-in-law, you will cross the line separating a forgivable prank from an unforgivable sin. You will betray not only your spouse but also the bonds of kinship, the duty to their entire family. The consequences of such a moral fall will come back to you threefold. Momentary pleasure will turn into a lifelong stigma of a scoundrel and an incestuous person. Love your chosen ones, keep faith with them, confirming it daily in deed, not in word. Fight for your marriage to the last, even if it seems that all is lost. Get divorced only when you realize that you are not on the same path together, but do not stain the name and honor of your loved one with a low betrayal. Remember how holy and desirable your love was once. Find the strength to return the old passion, mutual attraction, and trust. Only in this way will you be able to preserve the most valuable thing in life, the warmth of the family hearth and the respect of children. Something that I myself, alas, lost through my own stupidity. Thank you for listening to my confession. Talking about it is still painful, but if my bitter experience saves someone from a fatal step, then it was not in vain. Live honestly with yourself and your loved ones, not exchanging for petty things and not chasing ghostly happiness. And of course, be prudent, because for a few moments of carnal pleasure, you will have to pay with years of mental anguish, and few people are able to afford such a price.